Hello, everyone. This is Sinéad Whelehan here for this tonight's featured presentation. That's what Barbara and I are calling it. Tonight's featured presentation of Barbara Lamb School, otherwise known as episode number 3. And tonight's theme is OBEs. We're going to be talking about out-of-body experiences and how they have occurred in Barbara's life, what she has learned as a result of them, and what they have led her even further towards in terms of her spiritual and paranormal path in this life and also her professional path. So, Barbara, first of all, how are you doing today?
Oh, just fine, thank you.
Good, good, good.
With you.
Oh, I'm happy to be with you too. I'm just, again, so excited that we're doing this series. I really feel like it's just wonderful that we're doing this, and it's such a pleasure to be able to work with you and record these amazing stories that you have to tell. I hope everyone has seen episode 1 and 2 by now.
Okay.
There was so much that you told in your episode 1 and episode 2 experiences. So let's dive right into it. You were starting with your, let's just start with, I know you have this already planned out, but I imagine your very first OBE and then how that jumped on to the second one, because you've had more than two, you've had several. So
Yes.
go for it, Barbara. Where did this experience start with for you?
Well, first of all, I never heard about out of body experiences for many, many years of my life. And I just thought that, we are people here on earth and that's it. And that maybe somehow we have a spirit in some sort of vague way, but and hoped that we did. But I thought pretty much what we are is what we know of ourselves in our bodies as we go about our lives. However, in 1968, so I was already a young woman by that time, and one day I was having a professional massage by a wonderful woman. And in that massage, I was very, very deeply relaxed. And I was so relaxed that suddenly what I was aware of was that I wasn't in my body anymore. I didn't look back and see it, but I wasn't there. I was far away. I was actually in the Middle Eastern part of the world flying over the Suez Canal. At least that's what it looked like from being up 1,000 feet or so, maybe 2,000 feet up in the air, and
Wow.
just flying along and so free and being able to rise up and dip down and circle around and just have a lovely time all the time looking down at the land. And I felt like I was really, truly there doing the flying. No instrument around me, just flying freeform. And it was really a very lovely experience and quite mystifying as well. And then the woman who was massaging me came to the conclusion of her massage. And at that point, I was back in my body, lying on the massage table.
Just like that?
And she helped me sit up. Yeah.
Okay.
And I looked kind of dazed. I was dazed. I said, wow, for a while there, I wasn't here anymore. I just wasn't here. I was way far away. And she said, yes, I could tell you had left your body. So how she knew that, I don't know, but she was very skilled at what she did, and she knew
No
that.
kidding.
And she said, you've had an out of body experience. That was the first time I ever heard of such a thing.
It's also very interesting that she just said that, because I mean, it's not like people just throw that term out in the middle of an appointment that you're having. It's
Well,
not
and
common.
especially back in 1968,
Yeah.
I had never, ever heard that being referred to, that phrase. I'd never heard of astral travel,
Mhm.
but it happened. So that made me really think, wow, think more about myself and more about what all of us are, that we must be this other consciousness or continuation of consciousness or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a wonderful thing. And then in the 1970s, I was getting quite a bit of training in being a movement therapist, a dance therapist. And one day I was at a class. So this was probably about 1972 or so. I was at a class taught by a dance therapist, and we were doing a lot of movement, including some very, very vigorous movement. And then she had all of us in the class sit down on the studio floor and rest a bit while she gave kind of a lecture to us. And while I was listening to her, sitting on the floor with my knees up and my hands around my knees, um, I suddenly wasn't in my body anymore. I was several feet sort of to the side and slightly to the back,
Oh.
looking at the side and the back of my body sitting there on the floor. And I thought, oh, I, of course, never had that view of myself before.
I was
And,
just thinking.
and had a nice purple leotard on, and I can still remember clearly what that looked like, what I looked like in that purple leotard. And I was thought to myself, oh, that's what I look like in my leotard. I never knew that. And so I was out for oh several seconds. I think I got a good look at my body and a look at from that point of view of the other students in the class. And then next thing I knew, I was back in my body again, and we got up and did some more movement work. So
Wow.
that was really astonishing. Wow. So
Yeah.
first experience, I had gone far, far away, thousands of miles away. The second one, oh, just probably about 8 feet away.
Over your own shoulder kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And and then the next experience, also in the 1970s, one day, late afternoon, I was actually in my home, and I was carrying a tray full of glasses of water and glasses of milk to put on the table for dinner. And so I went from the kitchen um, into the dining room right next to it, carrying this tray. And while I was doing that, when I was almost at the table to put the tray down, suddenly I was in the next room, the dining room, probably about 30 or 40 feet away,
What?
sitting on the sofa, not in my body. And I was looking through to the dining room and watching myself come through the kitchen with the tray and and then just about to put it down on the table. And I got a good look at myself and I thought, oh, that's what I look like. That's what I must look like to other people. And I still remember the sort of yellow golden top and the gray wraparound skirt that I had and the way that my hair was. I mean, it was a really clear look at myself. And
Wow.
the experience was so impactful that I remember all the details, even the colors of the glasses on the tray, and
Mhm.
some milk and some had water in them. So that was amazing. And then the next thing I knew, I was back at the table, putting the tray down on the table and putting the glasses of milk and water in place on the table. So that was rather astonishing too. And I considered those really very nice experiences. Uh, wow.
It
So
seems like you were kind of popping out of time almost. I mean, the fact that you have time to shoot across or into two rooms, two rooms over and observe yourself and take in that much detail and then pop back into what must feel like the same second that you popped out of. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yet it probably seeing myself from the living room, probably I would guess when that went on for about 5 or 6 seconds.
Interesting.
The one in the movement studio too, seeing myself in my leotard.
Huh.
So that I thought, well, that's really interesting because this is what I must look like to other people.
Yes.
A little bit different than looking at yourself in the mirror.
Mm-hmm. Or
So,
looking down at yourself.
or looking down, oh, yes, definitely. Very different than that. So then, getting on into the 1970s, later in the 70s and early 80s, there were a few occasions when I went up to a wonderful retreat center up in the Monterey Bay area. It's called the Asilomar Retreat Center. And I went up there, about 3 or 4 times over a period of a couple of years to a wonderful retreat led by a really excellent spiritual teacher. And there would always be a part of the retreat where um, we would clear out any chairs from the big room that we would all meet in. There were probably a couple of hundred people in those retreats.
Oh,
And
wow.
there was a beautifully carpeted, soft floor. And people would sit down or lie down on the floor to listen to some wonderful music. And there were also some massage tables around the edge of the carpet that, if you wanted to, you could lie on a massage table for this sort of rest, this sort of music meditation experience. The music was really high consciousness, spiritual music, uh, composed and played by a woman with other instruments too, a woman named Constance Denby. And it was just, oh, wonderful music that you never hear anywhere else.
Oh, wow.
And so on one of those experiences, I was lying on the carpet on the floor and listening to the music. And after just several moments of resting, relaxing, breathing more deeply, and listening to the music, I was out of my body. I felt myself sinking through and out of the backside of my body, even though I was lying on the carpet on a solid floor.
Uh-huh.
And I was just out for a while. I don't recall now what I experienced when I was out, but it was a very nice experience. And then as the music came to a close, I felt myself coming back into my body, like floating down horizontally,
Wow.
down into my horizontal body lying on the floor through the front side of my body. And I thought, wow, that was really nice, except that I missed consciously hearing some of that wonderful music. So then the next year, I went to Asilomar for another one of those retreats. And this time I laid on a massage table while this beautiful music was being played. And again, I could feel myself sinking down through the backside of my body and up and out. And when that finished, several minutes later, I was floating down and re entered my body through the front side of my body, which was facing up. So those were really lovely experiences. And then in the early 1980s, there were several times when I drove up from Southern California to visit my son, who was at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And on the way up to visit him, there were a few times when I visited a retreat center up on top of a mountain,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Mount Madonna Center, which overlooked Monterey Bay. Really nice retreat center. And the retreat center had on its property a little hut, and in the hut was an isolation tank. So by that time, I had heard of the work of John Lilly and other people using isolation tanks. And I decided, wow, they have one here. I want to have that experience. And so I got into the little hut and into the isolation tank. It was completely private, completely silent. In the isolation tank, there was water, which was the exact temperature of the outside of my body. And it was filled with Epsom salt, so you could easily float in that water. In fact, it would be difficult not to float. You could not sink. So the temperature was the same as the outside of my body, the Epsom salt water to float in, and it was completely black. There was a lid on this tank, and you'd lie in it horizontally. And so here you were, you could lie out and it could stretch out as far as you could stretch with your arms. You could not feel the walls around you. So it was a totally weightless experience, a comfortable experience, absolutely wonderful. Just great for a superb meditation.
That sounds very
So
relaxing.
3 different times
Mm-hmm.
and had isolation tank experience. And nothing, spectacular happened, but it was a very wonderful meditation and also an experience of trust, to just trust that it was fine to be in complete blackness, not even one little speck of light, and to be just out there, arms stretched out, or just floating, not being supported by any grounding underneath. So it was an experience of trust. It was really very lovely. So about the fourth time that I had that experience in the isolation tank, something spectacular did happen. That I had ever expected anything spectacular, but on this particular occasion, it did happen. And that was that as I was lying there in the isolation tank, being more and more deeply relaxed, suddenly I was out of there. That is, my consciousness, my real self was out of my body, out of the isolation tank, out of anything near the world. I was out in space, and I was hurtling through space,
Wow.
really whizzing along. And I was thinking, I should be freezing cold. And then suddenly I remembered, oh, no, of course not. I'm not in my body. So
Oh.
there's no body to feel cold with. And I kept hurtling along like in a straight line. And then I noticed that there was a big planet straight ahead of me, and I was going to hit that planet. And for a moment, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to hit the planet. And then I thought, oh, no, it's nothing to worry about because I don't have my body with me. And sure enough, I hurtled right to that planet, through the planet, came out the other side, still in my spirit body, and felt, oh, that is wonderful. In this state of being, there's absolutely nothing that could possibly harm me because I'm not in my physical body. And just about that time, expecting to continue, um, I heard a great knocking on the side of the hut. And it was my friend who was accompanying me, yelling at the top of her lungs, saying, "You got to get out. Time's up. Stop. Else is waiting for this tank." Make an appointment to be in the isolation. So that brought me back through the front side of my body into the body, floating in the isolation tank. And I was able to get out of the tank and get dressed and, go on with the rest of my trip.
Wow.
But that was really a remarkable experience. I just loved it.
That sounds incredible. And before you were rudely interrupted, but it sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, I was thinking when you were describing in the beginning about being in the tank and what it felt like, I was thinking that I wonder if that's what it feels like to float around in outer space, you know. And then you said you were hurtling into space. So
So I wasn't just sort of floating around in outer space. I was just flying along at tremendous speed. And so I think now, I don't think I had thought that before, but that must be sort of what Superman must have experienced, the mythical Superman,
yes.
just to fly. You don't need wings, you don't need to flap arms or anything, because you don't have those physical aspects. It's just your spirit, your soul, your consciousness, just floating along like mad. So then I'd like to go on from there, that in 1981, I went to Egypt, and I had a magnificent experience in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. So I was with a group of people, it was sort of a retreat group, and we had gone into the King's Chamber to reenact what would happen to a spiritual initiate a few thousand years ago, when the spiritual initiate was hoping to become a full priest. And he went through different initiation ceremonies over a period of years, or even over a period of lifetimes,
Oh, wow.
in Egypt, in the temples going up the Nile. And then finally, the final culmination of his initiation would be in the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. So, with this group that I was part of, one person would lie in the sarcophagus, and eventually another person would have a turn, while the rest of us were standing around the sarcophagus doing the Om chant all together. And so it really created a different frequency in the King's Chamber, a different vibration, and certainly was a lovely experience for the person lying in the sarcophagus, and also for us doing it. Well, while we were doing that Om chanting, and this must have gone on for half hour, maybe 45 minutes, and that certainly altered the consciousness of each of us.
Yes.
And, while that was going on, I, who was standing at the side of the sarcophagus, I just felt transported, as if I had to go to the head of the sarcophagus, meaning the end of the sarcophagus where the person's head was lying in the sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm.
And there I had this wonderful vision of having participated as a priestess thousands of years ago. But after our group finished with that meditation experience, the group left, except for my best friend who was traveling with me, my best friend from my girlhood days, who
Oh,
had come from Connecticut to visit me. And I said, just stand by, please, while I have a turn of lying in the sarcophagus. So I climbed in, laid down on the granite bottom of the sarcophagus, and almost immediately I could feel myself leaving through the backside of my body, even though the granite was there and the pyramid, and flying out of my body, flying out of the pyramid, and my whole consciousness was out there, probably for about 20 minutes, with my friend sort of keeping guard. This was still before visiting hours of the pyramid in the
okay.
early morning. Well, after a while, um, I was brought back in awareness to my body, by my friend yelling at me and saying, "Come back, I don't understand it, come back, wake up," or whatever, you know. Yeah. And she was a friend who did not understand about outer body astral experiences. So she just didn't know what was going on. She could see that I was breathing, but she could not, quote, wake me up
Interesting.
in my body. And
Yes.
so anyway, I heard this yelling and I came back, floated back through the front side of my body. And as I was just descending to about where she was, I heard the yelling. And also I saw flashes of light coming from my right side. And as I got lower and lower, almost into my body, I was hearing a couple of people speaking German and still flashing lights. And then when I was back in my body and opened my eyes, I realized, oh yeah, there's my friend to my left, and there are two people visiting from Germany, and they taking flash pictures of me with their camera. So, but anyway, that was a very lovely experience as well.
Although I
Um,
was kind of hoping that the flashes and the German might be an extra layer of experience and all of this, and that it was just two tourists with cameras. But wow, that sounds absolutely remarkable. I'm noticing as well that it seems like the more these experiences went on for you, the more you are giving details about either coming into your body or leaving it versus
yeah.
just suddenly being out of it and then suddenly being back in. It's almost like you're feeling yourself more in the process of leaving and the process of re-entering, which is interesting.
Yes, yes, that's a very interesting perception that you have. And then there was another one in Egypt. This was a year and a half later in 1983. And I will preface this by saying that just before I left for Egypt that particular year, I was visiting a good friend of mine who was in the hospital dying of cancer. And we had a lovely visit. And she said, you know, I think I'm only going to be here for probably 2 or 3 more weeks. In other words, she thought she was dying and within 3 weeks.
Mm.
And so she said, by the time you come back from your trip, because I was going to be gone about 3.5 or 4 weeks, by the time you come back, I won't be here anymore.
Mm.
And so this is probably our last visit. And I said, and I don't know why, but I said, oh, well, maybe I can see you out there in the ethers.
Huh.
Now, I don't know exactly what I meant by that, but I think it was that somehow, since I had already been having out of body experiences, that maybe somehow I could be in a realm, not the physical realm, um, but, you know, see her again. So I had that thought, maybe I can see you out there in the ethers. And we both kind of laughed and thought, oh, that would be great. Yeah, let's do that. So, kidding more than anything, really. Okay, so then I went to Egypt, and about 3 weeks later, I, with the group that I was in a granite chamber inside the Valley of the Kings, in one of the cliffs in the Valley of the Kings. And this chamber that we were in for a meditation was sort of a trapezoidal shape. It was very narrow, and granite floor, granite walls, all with beautiful carvings in them from ancient Egyptian life, and sort of a ceiling that sort of slanted up. So the whole shape was an unusual shape to be in, a trapezoidal shape. So we were each standing and leaning against the granite wall and doing the Om chant again. And after a little while, I felt myself leaving through the backside of my body and through the granite walls, and was out in the ethers. which just meant that it was just sort of like a grayish sort of clear sky with nothing physical that I could see in any direction. And I looked slightly what I felt was downward and saw Cheryl, my friend, sort of like floating upwards,
Wow.
facing me. And she saw me, and I saw her. And we just had great exclamations of surprise and joy. And we held hands in our astral bodies and hugged each other and sort of held hands and sort of swirled around in a circle like Ring Around the Rosie and smiling and laughing. We were not in our physical bodies, but in our astral bodies, we could do all of that. It was a very joyous, happy experience for both of us.
Wow.
And then we let go of the hands, and she let go, and she started flying, floating upwards and said, well, it's time for me to be on my way to what's next. So she left to presumably go into the full spirit realm, which we go to after physically dying. And I suddenly was back in that trapezoidal chamber just as the Om chant was coming to a finish. And there I was standing there, still standing upright, leaning against a granite wall, feet on the floor. Everything was just fine. But that was really the most heartwarming of my astral experiences that I had had.
That sounds really beautiful. And was there any connection with the timing of this vision and with your friend passing away?
Thank you. Yes, I meant to say that. Yes, when I came back home again, I called her family to check up on her, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry. She did pass away while you were gone." And I had noted the exact date and time that I had that out of body experience and met her in the ethers. So I said, please tell me exactly the date and time. And then I had to figure out the time difference between Egypt and California, where she had died. But it was exactly that time.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes,
That's so
so that
wonderful.
was a wonderful validation
Yes.
that had really happened. So I didn't explain to them why I wanted to know the date and time, but I just thank them very much for that information.
Wow. Wow.
Kind of out of body experience happened at least two other times too. Um, in the 1990s, I had a very vivid dream. And in the dream, I mean, it was one of those dreams that is really happening, and yet I was asleep. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a vivid dream. Uh, there's another word for it too. Um,
Oh, a
well,
lucid dream? Like a lucid dream? Is that what
lucid,
you mean? Okay.
lucid. Thank you. Vivid and lucid. So in the dream, I was walking through the woods, and it was nighttime, but there was a glow ahead of me in the woods, and I noticed that there was a beautiful silver disc-shaped craft sitting on the floor of the forest, a UFO.
Oh,
It was just a beautiful, beautiful craft, plain and simple. And I went over toward that craft feeling like, oh, this is something of wonder and glorious. And then the next thing I knew, I didn't actually get to the craft in the dream, but the next thing I knew, I was flying at tremendous speed through a tunnel. It had light in it, and it was as if the color the tunnel was made of stripes, circular stripes of colors.
Wow.
It was lighted, and these beautiful colors whizzing through just at an incredible speed, and whizzing, 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 whizzing. And I was wondering if I was going into a different universe. And at that time, I didn't know very much about the universe. I don't think I had heard of portals before that.
Okay.
But perhaps that was a portal. And then I woke up from the dream and don't know what I would have ended up in, but it seemed like it was going forever. So then my last experience, and this was in probably about the mid 1990s, I was invited to go to a party at the house of Dr. Fred Bell, who was a very, very interesting, remarkable inventor and a Pleiadian contactee.
Oh,
He had been with Pleiadians since about age 11. And in his adult life, they kept giving him inspiration for inventions that he made,
wow.
particularly inventions that would help us from EMF waves and any kind of nuclear um, proliferation, or a number of the different kinds of toxins that we can pick up in our environment. Anyway, a very brilliant guy, very interesting guy. So
Wow.
I was fortunate enough, because of being a fellow speaker at a conference, to be invited to a party at his house. His house was in Laguna Beach, California, and it was on top of a mountain that is right there close to the beach. And so I was in the party and noticed, well, we did an hour or so of just socializing, quite a group of people. And I noticed that in the living room, there was no furniture. There was just a beautiful carpet on the floor, nice and sort of cushy and comfortable. And around the room were standing tall lamps that had almost like a bowl shape at the top. And in the bowl shapes were not only the light bulbs of the lamps, but were crystals, like a whole bunch of smaller crystals. And they were big crystals set here and there on the carpet all around the room. Some of them were 2 feet tall, some of them were 3 feet tall, even one was 4 feet tall. Glorious, beautiful crystals.
Wow.
That's all. Nothing to sit down on or anything. So after socializing for an hour or so, Dr. Fred Bell said, okay, everybody, let's gather here in the living room, just have a seat, which meant sitting on the floor, on the carpet. I'm going to play some music for you that I have composed, and I'm doing some of the instrumentals, and I have friends who are doing some of the other instruments. And you will hear in the background of the music, you will hear the sound of a Pleiadian beam ship, because Pleiadian beam ships visit me frequently right across the street from this house in an open field.
Oh,
and so I have gone out and recorded the sound of the beam ship. So I sat down on the carpet like everybody else did, and about 5 bars into the music, 5 notes into the music, I just thought, oh, I just had to lie down. I don't know what the other people did, but I lay down with my eyes closed, and immediately I was out of the backside of my body, out of there. And again, in that astral experience, I was hurtling through one of those portals or long tunnels, whatever it was, with the rainbow color of lights, and hurtling, 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 as if that was going on forever. And that one went on longer than the one in the dream. And then the music came to a finish. And the next thing I knew, I was back there lying on my back on the carpet and re entering my body through the front side of my body. Well, that experience was so magnificent and so disorienting
Oh, really?
physical reality that
Okay.
I was in quite a weird state for a long time afterwards.
Oh, wow.
And after about a half an hour or so, just not even wanting to talk to anybody. I mean, I was just in such an expanded state.
Mm-hmm.
But I remembered that I had promised my husband, who was in London, to call him whenever I could that evening. And so I asked for a telephone. Is there a telephone I can use away from the rest of the people who were talking? And I was directed to go down into the basement and could barely dial the phone number of my
Wow.
in England, but did manage to. And we talked for a little while. And after a while, I said, I feel really, really odd. I feel really different. Do I sound any different? And he said, well, you sound like you're very, very sleepy. And then, anyway, we finished our conversation. And a little while later, I got back into my car to drive home. And even though I had driven that route from Laguna Beach to my home in Claremont, California, usually about an hour and 15-minute drive, on this occasion, I got completely disoriented and lost. It was a really weird experience.
Wow. And so can I just ask you, how are you feeling? Like, I mean, I know you said that you felt odd, you didn't feel quite like yourself, but was this stressing you out? Were you just rolling with it? How were you feeling while this was going on? Were you anxious? Were you relaxed?
No, I wasn't anxious at all.
Okay.
Even being lost, I thought, well, wow, this is just weird. I but I guess, I mean, I'm okay. I don't know where I am, but I'm okay.
Okay.
I
Wow.
finally had to pull off the freeway at a place called Orange, not really being aware that there was a town off the freeway called Orange,
Yes. Okay. So is this New Jersey?
California.
Oh,
No, this,
California, of
yeah,
course.
there's an Orange, New Jersey too, but this was Orange, California.
Okay.
And I drove a mile or so through the town there. And then there was a big circular roundabout in the town. Now, that's the only roundabout, I think, in America that I know about. I'm very familiar with them, having been in England many times.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This is a roundabout in America. And the stores around that roundabout looked like they were probably from the 1920s or 19 teens or 1930s. And of course, this was very late at night. This was probably about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
So there weren't any people walking around. There were one or two cars. They were kind of older looking cars. And anyway, I finally stopped at a gas station because I could see there was a man in the window, the teller window. And I got out and talked to him and I said, well, excuse me, but where are we? He said, Orange. And I said, Orange? What do you mean, Orange? And he said, we're in Orange, the town of Orange.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, I've heard of Orange County, but I didn't know there was a town called Orange. And I said, oh, and when is it? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, what date is it? And he gave me the date. And I said, and what time is it? Because by that time it was probably 2 o'clock or so in the morning. And
Okay.
he told me that, and he said, And I said, well, I guess I'm lost. And he must have thought I was really weird. I thought I was weird too.
The whole thing sounds weird, honestly, but yeah.
And I said, well, I think I'm lost. And he said, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going home. And he said, well, where is home? And I thought, oh, let me think. Oh boy, I know it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, oh, and I couldn't even think of the name of my town. I could think though that I needed to be on the 57 freeway.
Okay.
That was good. I could, it was like a straw I was grabbing onto. So I could be on the 57 freeway, and I think I need to be going north. So he told me how to get back to that freeway, which is the one I had gotten off of. And then he said, "Do you know where to go after being on the 57 freeway?" And then I remembered the name of my town. So that was good. And
Yes, there was that. There was that.
I could sort of remember the connecting link between the 57 freeway and the freeway I needed to take to get closer to my home. So anyway, I set off again, and I did make it back safely, weirdly,
Wow.
to my own home. So that just shows about what the effect of that music was with the Pleiadian beam ship. And it wasn't bad. None of it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really, really strange. And I recognized that I was definitely in a different state of consciousness. So, for whatever reasons, I have not been aware of any outer body experiences since then, since the mid 1990s, but all of them reinforced my awareness that we are not our physical bodies
Mm-hmm.
or something else. We are a consciousness, we are a soul, we are a spirit that can have many different kinds of experiences and adventures, including having a lifetime in a physical body and on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that we also can have experiences in incarnations on other planets as well. But I didn't know anything about any of that at, at the time. But I think it was a wonderful thing that I had those experiences to keep reinforcing in my understanding that we're just temporarily living in physical bodies, and we really are so much more than that. And we go on in all kinds of different places and realms and dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a magnificent picture, the whole this whole viewpoint, which I totally trust at this point in my life. So I appreciate expressing about these experiences because they really meant a lot to me. Each one was a total surprise. I've heard since having these experiences that there are people who really want to have out of body experiences, and many of them will go to the Robert Monroe Institute in
Yeah.
the East Coast, Virginia, I think, and will study and pay a lot of money and spend a couple of weeks there, learning to try to have these out of body experiences. And I know people in my personal life who say, oh, I wish I could have one of those. And they will try and try and try and not succeed. So I think one of the key points here for having an astral experience is to be in a situation where you're very, very relaxed. And so, if any of you listening to this would like to try to have out of body experiences, just be in a place where you feel you and your body are very, very safe, and allow yourself to go into a nice relaxation, not even think about leaving your body, just about relaxing, maybe having some very relaxing music on, because that helped me on some of those occasions. And then it may just, without even trying, the out of body experience might happen.
That's
And
great
I've
advice.
shown.
That's great advice, Barbara. Thank you. Because I myself have never, well, I've had one spontaneous out of body experience, but it's one of those, it was a flying dream that was incredibly vivid, just like you've been emphasizing in your stories. Incredible detail. I felt like I was really there. I felt, wind on my skin. I could see detail below me as I was flying over a neighborhood. I was probably about 9 years old or so, and that happened when I was asleep. So I know that one of the theories is that we all go and travel when we're sleeping. We just don't know that we are, and we can become aware of that. So, many children have flying dreams. It's not that uncommon for that to happen. But in my older years, ever since, I say even age 10, possibly, I have not had anything like that. And I would love to experience it because I remember that dream that I had when I was, I'm pretty sure 9. And it was just such an incredible experience that I wanted it. I wanted to have another one, and for years and years. I mean, I really never forgotten it. I think about it every once in a while. It comes to mind. It's an experience that makes me feel like I can do that again. I just have no idea how. So there's such a thing as overthinking. And I love that you said, don't think about it too much, just get very relaxed and just allow it to occur in a place where you feel safe and supported. So
Yeah.
that's great advice.
And each time I had one of those happen, I wasn't thinking about leaving my body. So there, and that was probably helpful too, that I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking about that, because I wasn't trying,
Yes. Yes.
expecting, you know.
Yes.
I just, all I was doing was relaxing, just going with the flow, and then it just sort of magically happened. So I think that's a clue too, not to try to, or not to even say, oh, I'm going to lie down and meditate, so that maybe I'll have an out of body experience,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
that could bring the aspect of trying into it, which is sort of more of a tensing. We're trying, we're tensing,
Yes. Yes.
which might be inhibiting it. So
Yeah.
just just open. I'm just relaxing, meditating for the sake of relaxing and meditating, and ah, not expecting anything to happen. And
I
then I
was
think
going
it
to
was
say,
quickly too.
yes, I agree.
You might, on the other hand, just go to sleep. Uh, and
That's
that,
possible. It can be very, very. I mean, I was thinking about what you just now, what you had said about relaxation, because I was just remembering the very first experience you had when you were a child and you were in dance, you were in movement school, right? Were you a child? You were
I was a young adult.
a young adult. Sorry. Okay, in 1968, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so you're in movement class. So you're not exactly relaxed like you were on the massage table or in the crystal room, but you're in deep, I guess, communication with your body, and you're in a non-verbal practice. And I wonder if that had
Yes.
something to do with it. It was you're very in your body, you're in your senses, you're not using a lot of words, you're feeling very much, you're in that instinctive kind of mode. So I wonder if that's why that was the setting for your very first experience. That would make sense to me. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, the very first one was being massaged on
Oh,
the massage.
yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
But the next one was in the movement class. And I have always thought that there was something about doing that, maybe 40, 45 minutes of pure movement, non-verbal, non-intellectual,
Mm,
just pure movement, um, and then sitting down and relaxing because of the physical fatigue of doing all that movement. So I think the combination of the movement, which I think is consciousness changing.
mm.
Anyway, um, and then resting, even though not lying down in a total
Right.
rest, but very much resting and needing to rest at that point, sitting on the floor.
Integrating, I guess, right? You're integrating what had just happened in a sense.
Yes, as well as resting my physical body. And then, so I think that combination, the changed awareness, uh, changed consciousness from the movement and then resting. I think that probably had a lot to do with it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Each one of these, including the dreams asleep, um, they all involved. Oh, there was another one.
Oh
I'm
my
just thinking
goodness.
too that I had forgotten about. I was
You're like a horn of plenty of OBEs.
yeah, yeah. So in this one, this was in the early 1980s. Also, I was in a Tai Chi class, learning to practice Tai Chi movement, and there were only 4 or 5 other students and a teacher whom we all liked very, very much. And so one morning we had a class in a church building in kind of their recreation room. And we were all doing the movement, and we had been in that class for maybe a year and a half already. So we were very familiar with each other, very, very comfortable with each other, and enjoying doing that movement together, feeling like one sometimes. I mean, we
Beautiful.
had some wonderful, wonderful experiences doing that Tai Chi movement. So, this one particular morning, we were in this church recreation room doing the class, and very much in sync with each other. And we had learned the forms enough so that we didn't really have to think about what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just automatically just did it. And we're very much in the flow of the Tai Chi movement. And the next thing I knew, I was out of that building, flying across the fields and the hills that were in back up toward the mountains in the back, just flying around, having a wonderful time for terribly long, maybe a minute or so. And then I could feel myself and see from this astral self point of view, see myself heading back toward the church building through the big sliding glass doors and into the room where my fellow students were doing the Tai Chi movement. And there was my body still doing the Tai Chi movement. And,
That sounds
and
so
doing
funny,
it,
but it makes sense.
and continuing on with exactly that form of the movement. Now I'm remembering another one. And this was
Wow.
my college days a long time ago. I was with my boyfriend at a party at Yale University, and the party was in an old barn
Okay.
outside of New Haven, Connecticut. You know, the big, tall, classic barn. You know, the red barn,
Very
and
cool. College.
lofts and rafters up high
Right.
in this. And there was a wonderful orchestra there, and my boyfriend and others were dancing on the floor on the first level there. And it was wonderful. And there was a part of the dancing where we were sort of swirling around a lot. And I was just having a wonderful, wonderful time. Really liked my partner there, whom I eventually married. So we did having a great time. And the next thing I knew, I was way up there in the rafters of the barns. I, with my body still below, I could see my body dancing below. And I was there sort of somersaults and going around up around the rafters and around poles and things and looking down, hearing the music, seeing everybody dancing, seeing my body dancing with my boyfriend. And it's just a really wonderful, happy experience. And then the next thing I knew, I was down there in that body being swirled around and with my head back and laughing, having having such a great time, having with that and having been out of my body and being absolutely surprised. So that's actually the first time that I had an out of body experience, never having heard of it before. And I think I mentioned it to my boyfriend, and he said, "Oh, well, God, that's just you got to be your imagination. That doesn't happen to people."
Of
And
course, of course. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of people you couldn't share these experiences with back then, yet
oh,
you kept
right.
having them. I mean, how many have you mentioned so far? 8 or 9, I think, so far.
So,
Yes, that's a
and
lot.
since I've remembered these two doing movement and seeing my body move, now that is very interesting to me when you really think about that, that the body can still function and move when you're not even in it.
That's why I started laughing. I mean, when you said, and there was my body over there, still, still doing Tai Chi. That's why I laughed, because I just couldn't believe that you were witnessing yourself, so called, still
The
animated, still in sync with the rest of the class, still keeping up with what was going on. And you're not thinking about Tai Chi at all. You're way over here outside of the building. It really is quite amazing. We should find out more about this.
the land I was flying over and the hills and the mountains that I would have reached if I had kept going.
Wow. It's also interesting that you have these kind of, I don't know if this is what it felt like to you, but to me, it sounds almost as if you're boomeranging out and then kind of whoop, coming back in again,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're as if somebody sort of drew you back in a, what do you call those? In a slingshot.
Well, yeah, right.
And so you go woo one way and then boing the other way, but this way sounds a bit more like a boomerang. You're shooting out from your body over the hills or wherever it is and then coming back in, and it's to varying degrees of distance. Like your very first experience, you were far away from your body. Your second experience, you're just behind yourself and over your shoulder. Your third experience, it seems like there are all these, time and space doesn't have a whole lot of meaning, essentially.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes. And I mean, it could be just that, well, like in the dance class, the movement class one, I was just a few feet away looking back at my body and the carrying the tray in my home, I was maybe 30 feet away.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
yet,
I've got a question for you. I've got a
and yet
question for you. Sorry,
in
Barbara, go on.
most distant one, I was way out in space, the one hurtling through space.
Uh-huh. Far, 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 far away. Wow. Because I mean, there are some people, you were talking about people who have tried and tried and tried to have OBEs, but it just doesn't happen for them for whatever reason. And how, trying can sometimes keep us from being able to do it. We have to just not have any attachment to the outcome, just do something really relaxing, and if it happens, it happens. But
Right.
for many people it doesn't. So even if they are doing that, so why do you think that these experiences happened for you, and so many of them as well, when they just took you by surprise? You didn't know what an OBE was. It's not like you were practicing anything and trying to manifest this. It just boom occurred every time. So do you have any way of explaining how you were able to experience these things?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that I found out in a regression years ago, 1983, that I had an experience of being before this lifetime in that soul state of being and planning to come into this lifetime. And the main reason why I was planning to come into this lifetime is to show people how it really is. And what I meant by that at that time was to show people that we are not really just physical bodies. We are souls, ongoing, continuing souls. We come from a spirit realm and we go back into that domain, that realm, when we physically die. And that's how it is. And that there are millions, maybe billions of other souls in that spirit realm. And there are many other beings whom I later, many years later, recognized were extraterrestrial beings, but I didn't know about that at the time that I was having this regression. So, in other words, if I decided to show people in this life how it really is, that also would include that I would have to have some experiences to know that.
Very true.
So I think that that could be why it's happened for me, that I've had those out of body experiences, to realize that I really am a soul who's living in this body temporarily. I'm a soul, I'm a spirit, I'm a consciousness, and this is just very temporary. So how perfect.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of my learning in this lifetime in order to show people how it really is, that I would have those experiences. So I think it's a great blessing. I'm pleased, I'm delighted that I have had them, and that I know this is possible for everybody, because everybody is a soul, a spirit, a continuing consciousness.
Yes, yes,
In this body
yes.
now for a period of time, a number of years.
Well, what is that expression? We are not a human having a spiritual experience. We're a spirit having a human experience, or
Yeah.
something like that. There's,
Yes.
there's different variations of it, but yes, that does make a lot of sense. And if you're giving me a little flashback to, I believe, one of our personal conversations where you had talked about having a memory. I don't remember how it came up for you, the memory, but you had a memory of being with another being and planning this life with that being, like deciding what you were going to experience and why, and where it was going to lead you and that kind of thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and that was what I was just referring to.
Yes.
That experience of uh, discussing things and planning, thinking about what would be helpful, what kind of situation would be helpful for me to be born into in order to carry out this mission eventually of letting people know how it really is.
Interesting. So then, do you think that you might have stopped having out of body experiences because perhaps, I mean, obviously you got what you needed. Maybe you'll have another one still, but you seem to have got what you needed. So when you had that last one in the 90s, do you remember it coming with any sense of, I get it now, or any kind of new level of understanding or knowledge that you didn't have before as a result of that last OBE?
Well, I think that the hurtling through the tunnel, that was, and that happened at least twice, not in the same day, but different situations. But that was sort of an addition to the prior experiences, which let me know that I am really not this body. I'm just in this body, but I'm a free floating non body who's very conscious and could go anywhere.
Yes.
And, and then, so with the last one hurtling through the tunnel, the last two, I think, had that feature, was like, oh, okay, there are these tunnels or pathways or um, portals through to other parts of the universe and even different universes, um, out of the physical reality into other realms. So I think that that expanded the view even more.
Okay. So it
So
just,
maybe, and I think the reason I haven't is what you say. Um, haven't had any further since then, since the 1990s. Um, is that I got to learn what I needed to learn through these experiences, and so I have just had that understanding about those aspects of reality um, enough that I maybe just don't need to have those anymore. But if I did have another one, I'd certainly welcome it.
it sounds like it. I mean, even though it's been a while since you had your last one, you're obviously still feeling the impact. You know,
Oh,
like when you speak about them, you remember them with such clarity of detail. And, you know, the way you describe the experiences is really engrossing. And I can tell that it's still, you know, you're still filled with passion and energy about those experiences and what they mean to
yeah.
you. So obviously very, very impactful. And it's quite amazing, isn't it, how, you know, these are just not, I have not had an OBE, but I have had experiences that are similar in terms of energetics. And it's just amazing how clearly it is not a dream or a daydream. It's just, it's vastly, vastly different. And a lot of it has to do with the clarity of the experience. So I feel like you're really emphasizing that in a whole bunch of ways, emotionally, you know, visually, in a tactile way. And then the awareness that you have of how it changed your perspective and your life. I mean, what you said about what you learned from it makes a lot of sense, because I suppose when there's something really, really important that we need to learn, such as how things really are, then having more of those experiences, each one helps that understanding sink in more and more and more deeply, perhaps, and more, you know, becomes more and more integrated with our knowledge on a kind of cellular level, you know, rather than having one experience and having it be remarkable, but there's only so much you can learn from that, versus when you have them over and over and over again, it really, really sinks in. At least you didn't have two tunnel experiences in one day. That would be so exhausting. I can't imagine. If you did have two in one day, that would be too much.
Those the ones I had space in between. They were not in the same day.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
gosh for that.
yeah, yeah. Because
Oh
each one
wow.
is so vivid enough. Each one that I remember in enormous detail right now, all these years later.
Yes, it's really something. I mean, it does speak very much to how important these experiences are for you. And so I'm grateful that you have remembered them so clearly and beautifully, because you're able to share them with people who are listening to this conversation. And I think it really inspires others to know just that, you know, that there's so many different ways we can let our consciousness be itself, I guess, you know, let it explore the way it naturally wants to, by, as you said, hurtling through space, or, you know, boomeranging out of our body and coming back in while we're awake, or when we're asleep, or at all these different kinds of times. People have had near-death experiences that in some ways are similar to OBEs, or consciousness comes out and observes the body, and observes what's happening around it, and could go somewhere else. But it's really inspiring to know, not just think or imagine, but to know that our consciousness is who we really are, and that it can do all these extraordinary things. So thank you, Barbara, for sharing this knowledge and wisdom and experience with us.
You're welcome. I would like to mention one more thing,
Yes, of
that
course.
many people who have out of body experiences um, have the awareness of having a cord. They describe it as a silver cord
Oh, yeah.
connecting the out of body astral self with the back on the ground physical self. And I have not had that sense in any of mine.
Oh,
But that doesn't mean there wasn't a cord. I just wasn't aware of it in any of those experiences. But I am totally convinced that those experiences did happen.
of
It
course.
didn't happen to have my awareness of a silver cord attached to it.
What is the silver cord about? It's what keeps us attached to Earth while
It's
we're
attached to the physical body,
uh,
which is here, left here on earth, while the consciousness, the spirit, the real self leaves the body and goes somewhere else. And I think that that is reassuring for many people I have heard and read, um, that they have that cord and they know that they can get back to their body. It just happens for whatever reason that when I had those out of body experiences, I never had the thought, the worry about will I get back to my body. I was just so much enjoying being out of the body and having whatever experience that I was, and enjoying the feeling of amazement, astonishment, enjoyment that, I just did not get so far as to worrying, oh, am I ever going to get back to my body? It just simply happened. And I'm grateful for that too, that in each of those experiences, I had no sense of worrying about getting back into my body.
I imagine it really helps that you were always, I mean, from what it sounds like, a naturally adventurous person. And then I'm reminded also of what you were saying about being in the flotation tank and how it was an exercise in trust that you found really beautiful. You didn't say it was a scary exercise in trust. You said it was a beautiful exercise in trust, right? So I feel like there's a part of you that maybe didn't have as much difficulty as perhaps other people would have with just trusting that, you could just
Yeah.
shoot around in space and everything was going to be fine. You'd make your way back to your body at some point. It's not something you would naturally worry about. That's what
Yeah. In each of those experiences, in every one of them, I never even had the thought about how will I get back into my body.
yeah,
That just never came up, which is quite remarkable when you think about it.
it kind of is.
It's just
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoying it and being surprised and mystified and wow, you know, and it's great that I could just go with it, especially the early ones, not even knowing about it, not even knowing there was such a thing, certainly not even knowing there was a name for such a thing.
Yes. Yes. Well, good thing you made an agreement with yourself to surprise yourself in this lifetime.
I must have done that. Yes.
Way
Yeah.
to trick yourself and surprise yourself, Barbara. Good going. And also, I mean, it makes sense that you were just enjoying flying around and not worried about being back in your body because you are your true self. We are our true selves when we are just the conscious in the consciousness space, and that's all we are. So,
Right.
yeah.
So if I never had gotten back into the body after one of those experiences, that would have been all right. I
I
mean,
get it.
wise, but all right, because I was so fine being out of the body.
Yes, I understand. Oh my gosh. Yes. I understand. I mean, the body is wonderful in so many ways. It's a great tool for us and it carries us through life and it does lots of things for us that we can definitely appreciate. But it's also a pain in the butt sometimes and it aches and it does this and it does that. And so, and it's weighty, it's dense, there's a weight to it. So I remember that from my own, I think, OBE when I was 9, the flying dream, where this extraordinary feeling of weightlessness was with me as well. And I remember being
Yes,
struck by that, this
yes.
this incredible sensation of weightlessness. I've also gone to float tanks. And so I know what you mean by the isolation tank
Oh,
and by
good.
the trust that's involved. It really is quite an interesting experiment to do with oneself.
Yeah,
So
that really was. And that's probably why I had at least 3 of those experiences in the isolation tank before I had the experience where I left my body and was hurtling through space, because there was definitely a process of trust that I had to go through, being in a complete blackness, lack of sound. I mean, just like being in a black void, no feeling of what the body wasn't touching anything
Wow.
except the warm water full of Epsom salts. So this experience of as close as you could get to an out of body experience would be to be relaxed enough in one of those isolation tanks,
I
because you're
imagine
not
it's
feeling your body at all.
right.
And fortunately, in those experiences, I was comfortable in my body. I had no pain, no stomach upset or anything like that going on, no headache, so I was just this total comfortable being. But even in the first 3 isolation tank experiences, occasionally while I was in one, it felt like a little ripple of anxiety bubbles coming up through my torso, right up through my head. It felt like anxiety, and I would have to calm myself down and say, no, 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 you're perfectly safe. You're not going to drown.
Oh,
You're
interesting.
facing upwards. You're floating. You're not going to turn over. You're safe. And then the little bubbles would inside myself would subside.
Mm.
So, which what I think was the 4th experience in the isolation tank, with months in between those experiences. I think in the 4th one, I did get to enough trust and enough relaxation. Did not have those little bubbles surging up through my body of anxiety. Um, that's why I was able to have that experience.
That's
I,
wonderful.
yeah, relaxed and trusting enough,
Mm.
and
Mm.
just giving myself over to it without reservation. And again, not thinking about leaving my body, but I was in that state of total trust and relaxation.
That's wonderful. I mean, it helps also the environment of the complete darkness, like you said, no sound stimuli coming in, and that the temperature of the water matches your body temperature, which helps you not have awareness of your body because there's no contrast between the water temperature and your own body, making you aware. Yeah, it's very skillful design, really. I think that flotation tanks are awesome. I think everyone should try one at least once just to see what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I'm glad you
Barbara,
did that too.
me, sorry.
I'm glad you did that too, that you had that experience.
Yes, I haven't had an OBE in there yet, but for me, flotation tanks are a new thing. I've only just started exploring them over the last perhaps half a year. So I
Oh,
haven't really, yeah, I've only had 2 appointments so far. And so I know what you mean about the body kind of going, oh, no, 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 we can't relax. We can't relax. There's nothing underneath us. We might fall down. We might go into the water. It's almost that animalistic part of the body that is, turned on for survival purposes. And you have to talk to it, do that self-talk, as you were saying, to make yourself more relaxed. So I'm going back for a 3rd one soon, and perhaps there will be a difference. I'll keep you posted.
we do. Yes, please do, by all means. Well, it's been wonderful to be able to share about this.
It has been wonderful to hear. It's incredible the amount of experience you have, and we still have so much more to cover. You were mentioning earlier some ET experiences, and we're going to be doing that in our next episode 4. So just letting everyone know that is what we're going to be recording next in episode 4. Barbara's ET experiences, what she knows about the different races that are out there and what those experiences have been like. So there's a whole lot more to come. Barbara has a great deal to tell and to contribute. So we really hope everyone is enjoying these. And please, by all means, leave us your comments. We'd love to see your comments and hear your thoughts about what you think about these talks, these conversations, and we'll just keep them coming. And please share with your friends by all means if you feel inspired to do so. So, Barbara, thank you so much, everyone. This was Barbara School number 3, episode number 3. And we're going to be doing episode number 4 very soon. And Barbara, I'm just really glad to be doing this with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I would like to just add, too, that the reason that we're doing these sharings is so that it can be reassuring to other people listening to these things, reassuring that if they've had anything similar to what we're talking about, that it is okay. It's normal.
Yes, it is.
Part of our existence, our larger existence beyond what we experience in everyday life. So, my purpose in sharing this is to be reassuring to other people who may have had something similar happen in some ways to them, and also just to learn, for other people to learn about these other aspects of reality that they may or may not have heard of before.
Yes, yes, such as we are not our bodies. That's a big one. So this is proof. Yeah, it really, really is. I mean, we so associate ourselves with being our bodies, and we are just not. So I really appreciate that you are offering this proof and experience of the fact that, you know, we are consciousness, not our bodies. And this is all part of our conscious development, having unusual, so-called unusual experiences that are really quite natural and normal. And
Yes.
that, right, we need to talk about them more and spread the word that they are natural and normal. It's really okay. Whatever
Right.
you're experiencing is part of what you need to be experiencing right now for whatever reason that you can discover. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I appreciate your perspective and your comments on all of this.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. I love working with you and chatting with you. It's just a great pleasure to do this.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. We will see you again very soon. Bye, Barbara.
Bye.